Welcome to this video demonstration of Blueprint's automation lifecycle and control. Recently, we engaged with a large global enterprise, and here is their situation. They were transitioning from Automation 360 to Microsoft Power Automate Desktop, or PAD. Their plan was to have an orderly introduction to PAD, but it turned into all things happening at once. Most departments quickly started making new PAD flows and automating parts of their business. Some departments were resisting and holding tight to the legacy platform. And a few of those who've embraced it have actually created their own centers of excellence, although not coordinated, so each was kind of doing their own thing. And the central platform group is trying to establish overall procedures, standards, and a CI/CD pipeline at the same time that all of this is going on, not to mention that the migration effort is in full swing, with 100 of the 600 automations migrated so far. So the scaling is happening very, very quickly. All this to say the natural entropy of rapid scaling is happening in real time right in front of their eyes, and if left unchecked, this will get out of control and they'll be forced into a full-time firefighting and remediation mode. This situation is very common in large organizations as they try to deal with the democratization of business automation. And it's precisely what Blueprint addresses, giving the company tools to regain control and scale safely. Let me show you how. First, Blueprint helps customers rapidly understand what they have in their automation estate, both high level but also drilling into individual automations to understand them. It also provides the tools to govern and control all the automation activity that's happening. And third, it provides capabilities to continuously improve the automations over time, to take advantage of emerging technologies, and to keep aligned with changing business processes. Note that there's two entries here dealing with RPA migration. That's a big enough topic that we're going to deal with that in other videos. So by way of demonstration, we'll go left to right. First, we'll look at understanding. Here we are in Blueprint ALC. We've synchronized all the PAD flows that we wish to manage between Blueprint and Power Platform, and this is roll-up metrics on all of those. We can get a list of flows with key metrics information. Of course, we can sort and filter across those. The other thing in Blueprint is you can get a folder view or perspective of all the same flows. Lots of people prefer to organize flows by folder, and Blueprint lets you do that. So across all of these flows, at any point in the bottom right, you can just ask Blueprint questions such as, any flows handle inventory? And Blueprint comes back with a number of them. We'll take a look at the first. So picking any flow shows you the record for that flow with lots of information that Blueprint's extracted automatically from its code. There's different flow metrics available. How big is it? How many applications does this flow interact with? How complex is it? An AI description of what the flow does or its functionality, as well as automatically generated diagrams, like a flow diagram, where an AI-generated description of each major stage of processing is shown at top right. So between that description and this diagram showing me the main processing stages of that flow with details, I can get a good sense of how it functions. The other automatically generated diagram shows me how it's built or how it's constructed. This is the structure diagram. So this is showing me the flow with all of its subflows, external references, and so on. The color bar visually tells you, is this large and complicated or just small and simple? And you can click any of them to get metrics on the right-hand side or to generate a description of just that individual component or subflow, what it does, how it works. So all of this helps me understand the flow. Another dimension to a flow is time. In other words, how did this flow change over time? And Blueprint provides versioning. You can use Blueprint's built-in versioning for flows, or you can opt to use Microsoft's versioning. In either case, Blueprint adds value, such as taking any two versions and doing a comparison. Blueprint will show you if any of the subflows have changed, and if they have, it will show you exactly how they have changed. using green and red strike through, similar to word track changes. Not only code that changed, but also if any variables have changed. So that's a quick run through of some of the main features to help users understand pad flows. This helps reduce a lot of the wasted time with staff turnover, with contractors or SIs coming and going, or with just having to maintain flows that haven't been looked at for a long time. Next, we'll take a look at govern. We'll continue looking at the same desktop flow. What I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to launch off a specification creation. So what Blueprint does is pulls from all the information we have from that flow record under all the different tabs and organizes it into a document. You can pick and choose individual pieces you'd like to include or exclude. You can drag and drop to reorder things. And when you're ready, you can export as Word or view as a PDF. I'll just say view as a PDF. Now Blueprint's going to work away in the background while we continue with the demonstration, and we'll have a look at the spec once it's finished. Another aspect under governing automations is, of course, compliance and quality. And if you look under the Optimize tab, there's a compliance subtab, and what this shows is, in this case, all the rules that this particular flow has violated. This is out of a catalog of compliance rules that's available for use. You can enable or disable any of them. You can adjust the thresholds for these, and they will be automatically applied to all of the flows. So across a broad, diverse group of people making and maintaining flows, this is a way to keep some standardization and consistency across all of them. Another aspect that's quite important is whether there's any sensitive data within any of the flows. This is another thing that Blueprint detects. So in this particular flow, there's a fair amount. There's some confidential information in this subflow. There's multiple instances of PII, or personally identifiable information, in this flow and this flow. And there's some financial data as well as some payment card information in this subflow. And finally, Blueprint even found some PII in some of the selectors being used in this particular flow. So again, all of the automations can be automatically and continuously scanned to detect any of this kind of information in them. Blueprint also checks for what's called flow dependencies. So in other words, what are other platform assets or resources that this flow depends on? And they're listed down below. So here I can see that this flow that we're looking at depends on a couple of other flows and a couple of queues. Not only does Blueprint tell you it depends on those things, but it also tells you which subflows are calling or referencing those items, how many times they're being referenced, and the exact step number. So if I wanted to, I could just launch the pad editor and go look at those specific line numbers and see those references right in the code. This is very useful for when I'm doing maintenance activity and want to see potential impacts for some of the changes I'm doing. Blueprint also provides a very convenient logging feature. So this pulls just the log messages together into a single running chronological log across multiple runs. This information is in the pad logs in Power Platform, but is not as easy to access and view as it is here. So for a developer, for example, this provides a very convenient trace log when trying to get the flows running. So this is more of a runtime feature instead of analyzing static code, which the previous features were doing. Other runtime features are flow activity, where we can view the flow runs across multiple dimensions. And the reason we're doing this is to try to detect any anomalies. So that could be, let's say, memory utilization or duration of run being more than 3 standard deviations outside of the norm. Those are what we would call anomalies, and they can be very important leading indicators to potential problems. Resource starvation, maybe even malicious behavior under a security umbrella. So Blueprint provides a lot of very detailed analysis for pad flows, both static and at runtime. But it starts even before that. Blueprint covers the entire life cycle of pad flows. And that starts with automation ideas. So anybody in the organization can enter ideas to automate manual processes here. And some of those ideas get rejected. They end up in different states. Successful ones end up being built, as you can see with this OMED Wolf automation, with a status of in production. Now, looking at the details of an idea, this is the one for that OMED Wolf automation that was originally submitted. The submitter provides basic information, the pain points, the negative impact of not automating this, high-level information, ancillary documentation, what applications are being interacted with, any expected changes, the current cost, and so on. That information is then rolled up on the right-hand side to provide key business metrics that you would put into a business case, for example. And then Blueprint also rolls it into an idea score. So it can be weighed against other ideas that are competing for development resources. And as mentioned, if successful and it gets built and put into production, we actually have the flow and we can go look at its record and all the details that I showed you before. And there's always a link back to the original idea that gave rise to this automation. Finally, under governance, all of the information across all of the flows can be exported in a comprehensive set of Excel reports for any custom analysis you may want to do or for audit purposes. And Blueprint's finished generating that specification that we initiated earlier. So here you can see the spec, table of contents automatically generated, and all the details from Blueprint that you chose to be within this specification. That includes any diagrams that we saw earlier. Not only that, a complete change record that we took from that versioning we showed. So typically companies would auto-generate this at the end of development as it goes into production, so they deliver not just a production automation, but the documentation that goes along with it with no effort. But then on an ongoing basis, as that automation changes in any way, you can literally just regenerate and it will be automatically updated. All the effort, all the overhead that used to go into maintaining documentation is now gone. So those are some of the key capabilities of Blueprint in the area of governing automations. Now we're going to look at how Blueprint helps continuously improve automations over time. Still in this one flow, Blueprint provides what's called opportunities. This is opportunities to reuse components. So Blueprint can detect exact matches or even highly similar subflows that exist elsewhere in the estate, because those represent opportunities for reuse. If we were to act on those and make that a single component of code that those different flows reuse, then we will reduce the number of actions and improve maintainability and health of the overall estate. So those are opportunities we have for improvement. Another form of improvement opportunity is what we call cloudability. This is looking at all the subflows of this particular flow and saying, what's the potential for these being implemented as cloud flows? If we're able to do that, that would be an improvement. Cloud flows being generally faster and more reliable since they're dealing with APIs instead of UI interaction. So this tells us we have a very high cloudability potential with this particular flow, and we can see which subflows might give us some issues or require more work. While we're looking at a single flow here, we can do the same thing, but looking across all of the flows in the estate, which is here, both in terms of reusability and cloudability. So we could stack rank or prioritize these by sorting the columns, so that if we want to invest in some of those improvements, we know where to start. Another thing Blueprint does in the area of improvement at a very detailed level on an individual flow basis, we can do bulk find and replace of code. This is analogous to find and replace in Word, for example, except far more powerful. So I can do this on individual subflows, or I can do it on the entire flow. As the message indicates, we always are going to be working on the latest published version. But basically how it works is I can do find and replace, and maybe I'll pick one of my prior searches, internal var. So I'm looking for that string anywhere in the code. I have 4 hits, and I can choose to replace that string with anything else. I'll call it my var if I want. and it shows me visually what's about to happen. I could have it happen everywhere or maybe everywhere except this instance. I want to leave that one alone. Whatever my changes I add to the queue, and they get queued up with other potential changes and then applied. One other thing, if you'll note, in Find and Replace, we also allow regex, so you can get very sophisticated expressions here on these bulk replacements. There's a multitude of different uses for this. For example, maybe I want to replace Edge with Chrome and change my browser. This is a way that I could potentially have that happen. But whatever my changes are that I queued up, when I hit apply, I can create as a brand new flow and leave the old one alone, or I can overwrite the existing flow. That's my choice. Another thing that Blueprint does in terms of improvement is help us when other things are improving around the automation. Like let's say the applications that the flows interact with are changing, getting upgraded, improving themselves, as they often do. Well, I can look at native apps, but also external apps. They could be accessed through browser, for example, or desktop applications. Blueprint lists out a catalog of all the applications being used, and this is a result, again, of scanning the code, so there's no question as to whether these are being used or not. So, for example, if SAP was going to change, I can see precisely which flows are using SAP, and then if I go into that flow and look at its app tab, I can see the exact interaction, which subflow is initiating SAP, and exactly which line number. So from that comprehensive catalog of applications right down to the exact line number of code in each of the flows interacting with it, that's the type of impact analysis Blueprint supports. Now, another form of improvement for desktop automations is to transition them into an agentic world. Here's a quick way how Blueprint supports this. Let's say I have a new shipping agent and I want to give it new skills or new tools. I can look across my automation estate by asking, do any flows deal with shipment? Blueprint's found several. Here's a pad flow called Get Shipment Status. That looks like a good candidate. It's number 44. So picking that one, I can see the Copilot agent description that Blueprint automatically generated. This is the natural language description required by Copilot when hooking up agents. And when I'm happy with it, I can just say add to agent. Because this is a desktop flow, I need to define the connection reference. It is the shipping agent that I'm trying to augment, and I hit continue. So Blueprint works away for a little bit and has automatically set up that agent to be able to use that desktop flow. If we have a mixed estate, like I do, I also have an automation 360 automation called cancel shipment that I'd like to use. That's number 58. I can look at the Copilot description for that, which Blueprint also generates, and I can even add that to the agent. In this case, there's an environment variable used to establish connection with a 360 control center. Again, I want to add it to the shipping agent, and Blueprint will hook that one up. If we go take a quick look in Copilot Studio, looking at my agents, the shipping agent specifically, and refresh, I now have a couple of new tools that Blueprint just added a few moments ago. Not only that, Blueprint configured some topics to help the agent determine when to use those actual tools. And this is ready to go. So those are just some of the ways that Blueprint helps continuously improve the automations over time. Blueprint Automation Lifecycle and Control lets organizations scale their automation estates safely while maintaining the rapid pace modern business demands. Please check out the other Blueprint videos for additional capabilities or reach out directly at info@blueprintsys.com. Thank you for watching.